My name is Jared Spool, and I am honored to this morning be able to introduce our next speaker. I had the opportunity a couple years ago to start first exchanging emails and then meeting last year at this conference our next speaker, who is really, in my mind, one of the brightest people I've ever met, particularly when it comes to the specifics of what it means to produce content that is inclusive for everybody around the issues of hearing. We often, when we think of disabilities, we often think about blindness and physical mobility issues, but we very rarely think about what do people with deafness or hearing loss have from a experience perspective. And in working with Svetlana over the last year on this presentation and other issues, I have just been amazed at how deep these issues go and what we all can do about it. So I don't want to take up any more time, ladies and gentlemen. Svetlana Kooznetsova.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for coming. I'd like to start my presentation with a personal story. I moved here with my family from Russia to America when I was at a young age. And like many other millions of deaf and hard of hearing people, I grew up without access to TV, radio, and things like that because they did not have captions. When in Russia, there were very few open caption movies and news programs with access. 1 or 2 times a day, they would have a sign language interpreter offset on the corner of the screen. And that was similar to the situation here in America before the disability laws passed to make TV captioning required. When I was growing up, I was in a speech-based school. They call that an oral program. I did not know sign language, like many deaf and hard of hearing people. So I did not have access to sign language interpreters, and that's why I preferred captions. Also, sign language is not universal, just like spoken languages. That means that deaf Americans won't understand deaf people in England, deaf British people, but they can access the same written language via captions. When I was in middle or high school, my father bought a captioning decoder, and this was for the TV. It was something you could plug into the TV, very new for us. And we tried out all the different channels with it, and we were amazed. It was like magic that this box would create captions appearing on the TV screen. And those captions helped me not only as a deaf person, but for my parents as foreign speakers who were learning English as a second language. So captions benefited my parents too. They have perfect hearing, but their first language is Russian, so this supplemented their hearing in English to help them see the words. So from that day on, our TV always had captions on. Another great thing that deaf and hard of hearing people enjoy is the internet, of course. And that's an equal opportunity for us to communicate with hearing people through email, IM, and we can read simple text. But when the internet started taking off and becoming more advanced with multimedia, with podcasts and videos increasing all over the web, that blocked our access to communication. And it was almost like starting the fight over again, just like we did with television back in the day. So I'd like to show you a video now about what it's like for a deaf and hard of hearing person to watch something on TV or online with no sound or no captions. That's how I feel as a deaf person, just like all other deaf people, all the time without access to videos and podcasts without captioning. So now let's turn the sound and the captions on so that everyone can have accessibility.
This video demonstrates closed captioning. To turn on captions, hit the icon over here.
Les légendes et les sous-titres sont très utiles pour les personnes comme moi qui ne parlent pas une autre langue. Avec les sous-titres, je peux regarder des programmes en américain ou les informations russes. Quand je télécharge une vidéo sur YouTube, elle peut être regardée par les gens du monde entier, même s'ils ne parlent pas ma propre langue.
So now everyone understands what's going on with sound and captions on. Plus, people who use sign language, not only hearing people, a lot of deaf and hard of hearing people don't understand sign language too, so this gives access through the written language. And now with situations like this, deaf and hard of hearing people can feel equal to their hearing counterparts. I like to call this universal design, and here's a quote. Designing for extraordinary users in ordinary environments is the same as designing for ordinary users in extraordinary environments. This means that as a deaf person in a regular environment, it would be the same as a hearing person who needs to access a video in a noisy environment or on mute or without the access to headphones. So no sound equals the need for captions for all. So what type of solutions do we have? Is there a quick solution? Is auto captioning a good solution? I'll show this video. It won't have sound, but it will have the auto captioning on with speech recognition. Also, we will have the cart writer typing the captions, and you can compare the quality between the captions on the screen with auto text and the captions on the captioning screen from the cart writer here live. This is supposed to have sound. I wanted to compare the captioning with what you heard and what was on the screen. I just wanted to make a comparison between CART and the captions on the screen with auto text. I'm sorry, I guess we've had a miscommunication. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Unfortunately, we were unable to show that comparison, but you can see here that the CART captioning is good quality, and the captions on the screen were uninterpretable. They weren't in good English. Trained CART stenographers have 0.5 to 1% error rate, and this is so low compared to auto recognition speech that is so much higher, and 20 to 40%. At that percentage, it is completely unable to be understood. Anything over 10%, the whole concept is missing. And this is for people with good hearing, with no hearing. Just like if hearing people are listening to something with bad or garbled audio, it's the same as having bad quality or garbled captions. Now I'll show a video of two men in an elevator. There are no physical buttons on the wall like regular elevators. This elevator uses speech recognition.
What's the buttons?
Oh no, they installed voice recognition technology in this lift. I heard about this.
Voice recognition technology? In a lift? In Scotland? You ever tried voice recognition technology?
No.
They don't do Scottish accents.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11!
11. 11.
11!
Could you please repeat that?
11.
Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent. 11! 11!
That sounds Irish, no American.
What, doesn't it? 11!
Where in America is that? Dublin?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
So it's clear to see, even hearing people have a problem using speech recognition software. If you have an accent, even if it's in your same language, God forbid I ever be stuck in that elevator with the accent that I have, with my deaf voice, and then also my Russian accent. I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't be able to get out. So I'm not telling you that speech recognition is something that should never be used, but it is a tool, and it should be used appropriately. And in those instances, it can work well. You can use those to begin making a transcript, but you shouldn't only leave it to machines, because machines can't replace our human brains. Since the main users of captions are deaf and hard of hearing people, I'd like to focus on this group for a moment. Many people think that deaf and hard of hearing people are a small number, but that's not true. Here in America, 20% of Americans have hearing loss from mild to profound, and the range varies. In the past 20 years, it has increased to that amount, which was double what it was. It's also the third cause of health issues behind arthritis and heart attack. So what typically causes hearing loss? You probably think it's age. That's actually the second cause. Most people have hearing loss from continued noise exposure. So we're talking about young people here. And more often, we're seeing young people going to the doctor's office to have their hearing tested rather than senior citizens. 34% is caused by noise, and then 28% caused by age. The third cause is disease, which is 17%. I became sick with meningitis when I was 2, and that's how I lost my hearing. And then another 17% is from unknown origin. There's also a low number. Only 4% of Americans are born deaf, and 90% of them are born to hearing families. So this shows you why many deaf and hard of hearing Americans grow up using speech and lip reading rather than sign language. Also, just hearing is not enough. Even people who have hearing aids and cochlear implants, different listening devices, need different supplemental things like captioning. like talking on the phone. Also, you may hear a sound with one of these devices, but you may not be able to interpret the sound. I have a cochlear implant myself, and I can hear environmental sounds. I can also hear people talking, but I can't understand what they're talking about unless I have a visual cue. So we shouldn't assume that hearing aids and cochlear implants are a simple fix. Other different types of communication methods are here listed on the screen. Not all deaf people can speak, or lip read, rather. Not all deaf people can lip read. It's only 30%, that's only 30% accurate. And not all deaf people can sign. So it does not matter what communication mode is used, almost all of them can access captions. I put this picture on the screen of the phone because Alexander Graham Bell was the inventor of the phone. I find this ironic because he had a deaf mother and a deaf wife, and his invention itself was not accessible for people until many years later when the TTY and relay services were invented. Another group of people who benefit from captioning are foreign language speakers. This is another 20% of the population. Most of the people who bought the captioning decoder I was talking about that I had when a child were people who are foreign speakers, like my parents. They did not have a hearing loss, but in order to process the auditory information, it was easier to read the language on the screen as well as hear it, to make the connection. Another group that benefits from captioning is people with low literacy or remedial readers. And this makes almost 1/2 of our population here in America. But studies have shown that if they can read the captions while listening, it does improve literacy. Also, caption provides multimodal learning. People remember 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they only see, and 50% of what they both hear and see. So that means that students in a classroom environment, if they had access to captions and auditory information, they're more motivated learners, they absorb information more and retain it better. The total number of people who need captions here in America is over 100 million, or 1/3 of the American population. Now I'll show you a short clip of my hearing sister's college graduation 7 years ago. They had a huge graduation in a football stadium with 2 big jumbotrons there, and they had captions there on the screen. So take a look at that. This is a great example of universal access because it didn't benefit only deaf people like me, but the captions at this graduation ceremony weren't the first time I had seen this. I had them at my graduation at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, but that was because most of the students there were deaf and hard of hearing, so it was expected. But at my sister's graduation, her college maybe had a few, just a handful of deaf and hard of hearing students. So having captions at that ceremony was great, and it benefited not only me, but my parents as well, and then other people who were sitting in the nosebleed section who maybe didn't have access to what was being heard. So everyone had access. But that graduation was 5 hours long. So, so we talked about how over 100 million people in America need captioning. And the greatest accessibility user is search engines. Google is top ranked among the field. They help people who are blind and deaf access information on the internet. When blind people cannot see the pictures, they have alternate descriptions. And when deaf people cannot hear the videos, they have transcripts and captioning for things like podcasts and videos. Google loves captioning. And if you do a favor for Google by providing captioning and transcripts, it will improve their search engine, improve your search results, and then improve your ROI for online media. And I'll show you some statistics of why. For videos online with no captions, 60%, 66% of them are viewed. Compared with captions, there's 91% viewership. That is a 38% increase. So it benefits not only just people with disabilities or people who are watching, but for online media use owners as well. We know that by law, you must online provide accessibility with captioning and transcripts. And it is nice to have laws that support people with disabilities. But I feel strongly that rather than following the law, if we follow a sense of awareness and empathy, that is more important than the letter of the law. Because people say, yeah, we must follow the law, but a lot of them don't understand the meaning behind the law. But once you understand the meaning behind the law, we'll see an improvement in following the law. The medical approach would be that deaf people need to be fixed, like providing them hearing aids or cochlear implants. This is like providing a person with mobility issues a wheelchair. This does not give them full access to all locations. Think about stairs, if there's a place without an elevator. This is the same thing, talking about captions with hearing people. The next theory is with the social theory. A lot of people just don't understand the need for captions. I prefer the economic model, and that is more demand-driven approach. And this is based on universal design and universal appeal. Business people have market research on gender, on age, on ethnicity, and there's a lot of research about that. But the research on disabilities is very slim, and most of it is medical based. So most people only talk about appropriate accommodations. And remember, people with disabilities make up the largest minority group with and that is a $1 trillion market. That is twice the spending power of teenagers. And here in America and in the world, it is a $4 trillion market. That's the same as the market of China, the size of China. That's a huge market for us to be ignoring. If a business ignores people with disabilities, they not only lose those people with disabilities, but also their family members and their friends. And that is 2 billion people in the world. That's a loss of an $8 trillion market. So if businesses have more awareness of people with disabilities, then this will improve. Their services will improve for the end user, and then their profits will improve. Now we'll talk about we've talked about why we need captions, who benefits from captions, and we'll talk about how to make them accessible. Speech recognition, we've showed, does not really work. There are 3 types of media that need captioning: podcasts, videos, and live events. Podcasts and videos are pre-recorded media. So for podcasts, you can make a transcript. You can get transcripts from places, well, you can make transcripts on your own by listening to the podcast and typing it out. You can use a speech recognition software and then edit it, do it the right way. Or you can outsource a vendor, like an example is Casting Words, which is one of the most popular ones. You can also check for a list of other services, which is provided by Sean Henry. She is the director of Web Accessibility Initiative, and she has a great list of resources. Spending on transcripts may seem unreasonable, but they're very good quality. And transcripts cost more than, fixing a transcript costs more than making one from scratch. And paying for a transcript is no different than paying for audio editing, video editing. That's just a part of making media. And you can get more money back later, as we talked about, as more people can enjoy what you've made. This is an example of an accessible podcast with the user interface, or with UIE, user interface. And a lot of people have enjoyed reading and therefore hearing this podcast. We're very thankful that we have accessibility like this. If this wasn't provided, we wouldn't have accessibility to this at all. I like that it says full transcript, because then the user knows that it's not a summarization, and that's an easy way to recognize that it's a verbatim transcript of what's being said. I also like that it shows the speaker's names in bold, and that the information text is broken up by paragraphs, so that it makes it easier for the user to read. So this is a job well done. And hearing people benefit from transcripts too. Listening to a transcript may be slower than reading the transcript is much faster than listening to the podcast. You can skim over and get what you need. For videos, the solution is to have both captioning and transcripts. Transcripts provide basic access, but then captions need to be provided in addition. The reason is because you use a slow internet connection where the video won't stream, or maybe the video is very long and you rather skim over the transcript. Also, a transcript can video deaf-blind people who can use refreshable braille electronic devices, but they cannot do that with the captioned video for 2 hours. There are some specific requirements for captioning, and they're similar to transcripts. You want to have the speech and the caption sync up. There shouldn't be a delay in either direction. Secondly, you want to have equal information, no summaries. You want a word-for-word interpretation there. So if the person's cussing, then you have to caption that too. We want equal access here. If it's heard, it needs to be captioned. It also needs to be accessible and readily available. You know, it's not nice to say when a video is loaded, well, we'll have the captions up or the transcript up next week. You know, we want to be able to listen to it at the same time. For us as a deaf group, it's like reading yesterday's news when everyone else gets to see it now and we get it a week later. There's a website, Captioning Key. And of course, here in this short talk, I can't give you every information about captioning, but they have more resources there if you're interested. This is an example of accessible videos with the Vanguard website. They have both captioning and transcripts here with the video. The transcript is best in HTML, not a PDF or a Word doc. It's best to use plain HTML for accessibility. Captioning you can use almost any player for a video, but you want to choose a player that provides captioning support. And it's best to have one button for sound and one button to turn the captioning on and off. There are so many different captioning tools, and it's best to pick a video player that supports captioning. If you can't afford captioning services, YouTube is a great, cheap option, and they provide auto-syncing for transcripts to be synced to the video. You can also see that on a laptop, but you cannot see that on an iPhone or an iPad because Apple has yet to provide that because of the flash requirements. So you can't read the captions on YouTube on an Apple product. Just letting you know, but that's the best reason to have both captioning and transcripts, so that way if you were on an Apple product, you could use the transcript. Some videos don't have captioning support. For example, if you're using Vimeo, unfortunately, Vimeo has not provided captioning support for the past 4 years, even though so many users have complained that they need to add captioning support. So if you have any type of video player like Vimeo, you can use Amara. This is like a skin overlay that will help you provide captioning where the video player does not. It's JavaScript, so it's best to pick a video player that has a built-in captioning solution like YouTube, but if not, you can use this. So we've talked about solutions for podcasts and videos. Pre-recorded events are easy to make captioning and also transcripts. You can do this on your own time. You can outsource it. You can use a student. There are many different ways to make this happen, but for live events, that's a little bit of a different story. You can't just have someone who knows how to type on a laptop. You need someone who is trained and skilled in this area. You can hire a cart writer, and they have a minimum speed of 200 to 225 words per minute with a required 98% accuracy because real-time captioning requires this. A professional cart writer has had specific training similar to a court reporter. Both go to school for 2 years, and they use a stenography machine. But a court reporter is not real time. When the court reporter is reporting there in court, no one sees the information at the time. They type slower, they make more mistakes, and then later on they go back and fix their transcripts. So this is not a solution for deaf and hard of hearing users. CART is specifically for deaf and hard of hearing users or for a general audience like we have here because of its real-time accessibility. Speed is important. Remember, we talked about how bad captioning is not accessible, and that's a frustrating experience for those who are relying on captioning. Another thing that I want to mention is that CART and also court reporters now is the fastest growing profession by 18%. So if there's anyone that you know who's interested in that type of career as a future career, there's a great need for CART writers and court reporters. Here in the country, we only have 280 CART writers That's not more. That's not enough. We need more. There's another service that's called cPrint, and then another called Typewell. And those services, they call them CART services, but really they're not the same. Those are electronic note takers. It provides the same information, however, it's not verbatim. They use summaries. For webinars, these are a specific type of live events, remote, online, that you may attend. You can hire a CART writer, like we're using here in the room today, and that's a good solution.
For the presenter, you can enter questions and comments at any time during the presentation. Simply type them into the lower field of the chat window and select the end.
There are so many different ways of making webinars accessible, and this is one example. This is using Adobe Connect. And you have to have the plugin on your computer, and then it has a caption pod at the bottom of the screen. You probably saw it there providing the captions. You can hire a CART writer for a webinar to provide the captions there, or you can use stream text on any device, not just laptops, but also iPads, iPhones. And this is what we're using here today, is stream text. This is used through the web browser, and I have it here streaming on my iPad live. This is good if you don't want someone there at the meeting, or if you want to sit far away, or if you're attending the meeting remote from home. You can just log in and read the captions as you go. This is another example of captioning. It's a short clip, well, several short clips. One is of a play, a live play that had open captions. Also, you'll see a deaf student using CART services in a classroom. And then thirdly, you will see a deaf surgeon using captioning as he's performing surgery.
A lot of the audiences that we talk to enjoy it anyway.
There are hurtful, vengeful spirits laying hands on these children. Thomas, you cannot.
It's all a pre-formatted script that has been edited by me. Play like today, that script was a long script, and you have to go in and you have to change every word according to how they've broken up their sentence.
DRC accommodates me through use of CART. It's computer-aided real-time transcribing. The easiest way to explain it is a court reporter who was in class with me with a stenograph machine. And I have a laptop computer on my desk that types word for word what is said in class. I feel like with CART, I do not miss anything that's going on in class.
Screen. And then she said, well, I'm going to do surgery. Why can't we do it here?
It's much like a court reporter. They have a stenograph and type everything word for word.
Okay, now use the marginal pulse.
We're using the internet as a live communication between where they are and the OR.
So you take that off, then you can see the splenic flexion.
The main thing that I use it for is when they're quizzing us in the middle of the procedure, especially questions about.
And this video shows that deaf people can work in different careers, like doctors. Many deaf people I know are doctors, dentists, and family doctors, and they have no limitations thanks to captioning. Some of you may think that providing captions for all of this media is impossible, but you have a lot of power to help people access information through captioning. I like this quote from Audrey Hepburn. It says, "Nothing is impossible because the word itself says, I'm possible." And I can't go into all the details of captioning here. It's just so dense. But I have a website called audioaccessibility.com. Feel free to browse around for more information there. I'm open to having your emails, your feedback. If also you'd like to share a story with me, or if you want to email me about your experience here at the conference, watching the CART captioning on the screen, or any experience you've had with captioning, I'd love to hear from you. I'll post that on my blog. I'd like to add some comments from everyone, and if you would, please provide me, rather than your name, just some way to identify yourself, like I'm a father of a deaf son, or I'm a CEO, or I'm a filmmaker, just some way to identify who you are, because then we can see what types of people benefit from captioning. Good quality audio is equivalent to good quality captions, and we need both for all video players. Wouldn't it be nice to have that for all video players? 2 buttons, one for audio and one for captioning. Good quality captioning. I'm sure you've heard of the quote, let's think outside the box. I say today, let's think outside the ear. And let's not give limitations to providing information only through auditory means, but we can provide auditory information in a visual way too. I want to thank all of you for coming here, and I also want to give a big thanks to Google for sponsoring communication access here at the conference. And I want to thank Brian and Big Design for organizing this event with accessibility. I'd also like to say thank you to Jennifer, who is the owner of Coast to Coast Captioning. And I want to say thank you to the cart writer here today and the sign language interpreters. Without them, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have this opportunity. So thank you for coming and sharing with me today. I have a few moments for questions.
Have any questions from anybody? Yes? People. Yes, Sveta, do you have a Twitter account?
Yes, I'm sorry, I meant to put that down. In my bio, you can find that information there. It is SVKNYC.
Got some questions?
I'm curious if your disability is forcing you to, or forcing hearing impaired people to limit their possibilities career-wise. If all employees are openly hiring, or how does it limit? Where can we help more?
Well, first I'd like to mention that many of us don't like the word hearing impaired because it implies that we're broken. And so I'd just like to educate you all that the better word choice is deaf or hard of hearing. So just for your information. And then, unfortunately with the law, we're still experiencing many frustrations with employers and accessibility, and with education too. But it's much better than before, and it's much better than other countries. Here in America, we have the best accessibility comparatively. But many people are still unaware about it. And the laws are not sufficient. We need better awareness, and we need more empathy. Did that answer your question?
Any other questions? Yes? No? Oh, we have several. Oh, I'm just.
I don't have a question, but just a comment. I'm happy that the President Obama just signed a law, I think a few months ago, that all internet news are required to transcribe their videos. So I'm just happy about that.
But still, you know, it's great to have the law, but it's not being followed.
I just was in a presentation given by a person who is deaf and hard of hearing that said some people don't even recognize the written English language because it's their second language and ASL is their first. How would captioning interpret in that situation?
Well, the highest percent of deaf and hard of hearing people don't use sign language. And from my experience socializing with deaf and hard of hearing people, yes, we use American Sign Language, but there are more and more of them who have a better command of the written language because of continued education and the improvements in education here in America. So you're talking about a low percentage. My first language is Russian, but that does not make an excuse that, or I don't make excuses for not having a good command of English just because Russian is my first language. You know, I'd use whatever language I need to use. And it's important to have a good literacy of the language that you are using, especially for deaf people, because not many people use sign language. So increased literacy is important so that we all have that common thread.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much.